Head over to BoardGamePrices.com to get the best price on Pandemic Fall of Rome and thousands of other games. Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here. Today, we're going back to ancient Rome, where different barbarian tribes are going to be trying to come down into Rome and destroy it. Now, today we're going to be taking a look at a new standalone game in the Pandemic universe called Pandemic Fall of Rome. This is for 1 to 5 players. It's a cooperative game that shares many of the same mechanisms of Pandemic, but there's also some new twists as well. It's a standalone game. Let me show you how it works. I'll see you on the other side. In Pandemic Fall of Rome, you're going to be assigned one of these 7 role cards, which will actually have multiple actions you can take and some special actions that have to do with battling. So here's the board of the game, and what's happening is there's 5 different tribes of barbarians that are going to be moving around, coming down, and eventually trying to take over Rome. If Rome ever gets completely taken over, which I'll show you later, the game will end. Also, if Rome ever starts to decline and gets all the way to the bottom, the game will end. In both of those cases, you lose. What you're trying to do is form alliances with all of these tribes and or get them completely off of the board. So let's talk about how this works. Now the way this works is it's going to go in clockwise order after the first player has taken their turn. So each player is going to do some actions. There's some cards that tell you what actions you can take. And after they've taken those 4 actions, they're going to draw 2 cards to their hand, which will give them more options in future turns. But then something bad's going to happen where the cities are going to be invaded by barbarians. Now you're trying to form alliances with all of these, and how do you do that? Well, there's a set of cards that you start the game with, and these cards actually are from the different spots on the board. They show you the maps, the names, and they correspond with different barbarian colors. Some of the spots can have different types of barbarians on there, but what you're trying to do is get a certain amount of cards of a certain barbarian type and get to a spot in one of those cities and play those cards on your turn and be able to actually have an alliance with them. So if you had 4 of the cards of the orange and you were there and you discarded them, you can have an alliance. If you get all 5, you will win the game. But you're also trying to balance that with removing these barbarian cubes, because if Rome gets overrun, which we'll show you later, you'll lose the game. So on your turn, what are the different things you can do? Well, your pawns can move. For one of your 4 actions, you can move to a spot that's next to where you're at. So you could simply move here. Now, every pawn starts with 2 of these legions. This is going to help you remove these. So you can bring up to 3 of them with you in a city. So what do these do? Well, another thing you could do is to battle. You can't just use actions like regular Pandemic just to get rid of cubes. You actually have to battle them. For each legion that you have there, you get to roll one of these dice. And sometimes you're going to be taking out cubes, sometimes you're also going to be losing legions, and sometimes you're just going to be losing legions themselves. So this is a bit of a randomness, but you roll 1 die for each of these. So if I had rolled this, I actually would have only gotten rid of 1 of these cubes, and both of my legions would have been gone, and they would have been put back in the supply, but I've at least taken care of 1 of these. Sometimes you'll actually roll this little symbol here. They will activate a special ability on your roll card. In this case, if you're in a port city, meaning on the ocean, you can remove 1 barbarian from there. Well, that would have been cool. But some rolls are actually, it's bad with. You'd actually remove a legion from your city if you roll that, because this person is not good at battling. So it's an interesting twist to the game. Well, now you know how those legions work. How do you get them? Well, for an action, you can discard 1 of the cards from your hand that's in the city that you're in, and you can actually place a fort in the city that you're in. And once you're in a city with a fort, you can take a recruitment action to get as many legions as to where this recruitment tracker is. And this will be changing over the game, but at the beginning it's at 3. So if you did a recruit, you could have 3 legions there. So those forts are really going to be strategically placed. They're hard to get because you got to have that right card, but you can place legions there and bring them around as we just showed. You can also move pretty fast. If you're in any one of these port cities with an anchor, you can discard a card from your hand. In this color of the barbarian, you can go to any of the port cities with that color. So I can move from this port city all the way to any of these that were that color that also have a port symbol, so you can move pretty fast doing sailing like that. Now you're only taking 4 actions on your turn, but I'm kind of showing you all of them. If you're in a city with another pawn and you have a card of that city, you can either give this card to that player, or if it's their turn, they can take this, assuming that both of you agree. So it's a way to give cards to other players, but you got to both be in that same city. Now the name of the game is Forming the Alliances, and for this tribe you need 5 cards. You need to be in a city that has at least one barbarian of that type, and then you've got to discard from your hand that many cards of that type to the discard pile in order to form the alliance, which now that means that you're 1/5 of the way of winning the game. Now, after you have an alliance with one of the barbarian tribes, they still come and they can still hurt you and they still work like normal. However, you can enlist barbarians, which is if you're in a city with that color that you've already had an ally with, if you discard any card of that color, you can replace, meaning put these 3 cubes back into the supply and replace them with 3 legions. So as you start to get alliances, it's a little bit easier to get those legions out, and the game has a bit of an arc like that. Now, in addition to the normal city cards that I've been showing you that players use, there's also different event cards, a certain amount depending on the number of players, and these actually have 2 different options. You can do something, you can play them, on other players' turns as well, but you can move the current player to any city. They can take up to 3 legions with them, and the player can do a free battle action there. Or you can do something even more powerful, which is do the above, but you ignore the legion losses. So each of these event cards have a normal action, which are great, and a more powerful action, but they hurt you. And once you use those, they're discarded out. Because if you take one of those more powerful actions, the Rome starts to decline, and if it ever gets down here, then you've lost the game. Now let's talk about some other ways in just a moment how this decline happens. So after the player does their 4 actions, they're going to draw 2 player cards, and most of the time they're going to be city cards like this that they'll add to their hand, and they got to keep, 7, no more than 7 cards in their hand. And then you'll invade the city. Now, invading the cities happens depending on how far down this invasion track this is. Like right now, it's telling you we draw 2 cards, but as you go up there, you can see you'll be drawing more and more cards as the game goes on. And you'll be drawing them from this, and when you do this, you'll be drawing cards from here. It will be telling you where to place these cubes. Now this is an interesting twist because you don't just place the cube where it tells you to, because if you think about it, the barbarians move down certain tracks and follow certain arrows on different cards, and they want to go here, but there's no cube here. They're not yet there, so it doesn't go there. So you work your way back, and if there's not a cube there or in the one previous to it, you keep working your way back. So even though it has this cube actually goes here. Now, if this cube was already here when this was drawn, this wouldn't get one because it doesn't have one and there's not one right before it, but this one would get one because there is one before it. So it's the thematic thing that as this happens, the barbarians are sort of, marching down different ways, and it's a very different way that the cubes spread in this version. And of course, you'll be drawing as many cards as the evasion level. Now, sometimes when drawing your cards, you'll actually draw a card that will be a revolt card. And this is when you'd actually increase this invasion up here. And again, as it goes up, you're going to be drawing more invasion cards, and you're going to be getting less recruitments of legions as the game goes on. You're actually then going to pull the bottom card off this and put 3 cubes in this city. Then you're going to take this deck, shuffle it all up, put it on top, and then draw as many cards as your specific invasion level, which would be 2, and you'll be putting cubes as shown previously, just like that. Now, when adding cubes, if ever there's already 3 in a spot like that you're supposed to add, and let's say we're supposed to add 1 here, that doesn't happen. Actually, what happens is it's called the city gets sacked. It's pretty much the same thing as an outbreak in original Pandemic, is it will now feed a cube into every single adjacent, path city like that, just like that, and that can actually cause more sacks to happen. And each time that happens, the decline goes down. So that's another way for this to come down. And again, if it gets to the bottom, you lose. So another way to lose, other than being declined all the way, is if a city gets sacked that is Roma, then you lose. Meaning if another white cube had to get added here, since it can't, and it would have sacked, meaning it would have sort of outbreak there, you would lose as well. So you're trying to protect Roma. Those are the 2 main ways to lose. Also, if you run out of cards from the draw deck, you'd lose as well. And how you win is by having alliance with all 5 tribes, but you can actually win a little bit differently as well. If you have, let's say, 4 alliances, and you're able to remove the board completely of any and all tribes that aren't yet aligned, then you also win. All right, well, there's Pandemic Fall of Rome. Now, what did I like about it? I liked the new theming. In fact, this is the only, standalone version of Pandemic, other than the original and the Legacy series that I played. I haven't played the Iberia. I haven't played the High Tides. This is the first one I played. I was really interested in it because of the historical theming of it, and I like those types of things. So I do like the new theming of Rome and the way they bring that in there. I like the new way that the cubes spread. As something comes up, if there's no cubes there or nothing just before it on that path going down, it doesn't get a cube and it works its way back. Which is interesting because that means that the barbarians are thematically moving from where they start, and if it goes way down to the end, well, it goes back to the first place they could actually spread in that specific line. And so it's an interesting way to make those cubes sort of go mechanically, but it's also an interesting way to do it thematically as well. I like that there's a different amount of cubes and a different amount of cards needed to form an alliance with the different barbarian tribes. You know, the blue has, I think, the least amount of cubes, and so you have the least amount of cards as well to be able to align with them. But you know, like the white and the black, I think, have the most, and they have, you know, the most cards, 5, I think, that you need to get in order to, you know, play those down to get the, you know, that specific alliance with them. So I like how they're sort of different a little bit between those. I like that the different roles that you can select, obviously they have 2 different abilities that you can do. That's better than usually just the one in the other, and you know, the main game, the base game. But they also each have a unique activation that happens when you roll the dice. And if it has that little eagle symbol, then hey, that's going to happen. And some of them are going to be good at combat. Some of them it's actually going to be a detriment depending on which role you bring in. I think that was cool too. I like that the event cards have 2 choices: a normal one, which is still very good, or an even more powerful one that brings the decline down 1 step closer to losing the game. I like that too. Good, tough decisions to make there. I like managing the forts and the legions. That's sort of a new twist where you can't just go on and just for an action take a cube off the board, or barbarian in this case. You actually have to have a fort or bring some legions over there, and then you know, actually do the battle by rolling the dice. And so I like that you got it's a new twist on how you need to, you know, go about removing those cubes. So that's what I liked about it. What I didn't like about it, I didn't like the randomness of the battles, rolling those dice. You're bringing legions, you don't know how many are going to last, and I think stronger Euro players are not going to like that. I'm not like a big, heavy Euro gamer, but I do like Euro games. And I don't mind dice in games, but this one felt just a little too random for me that, you know, hey, I'm going to bring these legions, and it makes it hard to plan. You're constantly moving. And I think some people might actually like that aspect of that change. It wasn't one that I, you know, terribly liked. This one, for me, didn't really stand out. I liked the twists. I liked the theming. I liked the new things they did. But you know, when I look at today's board game market and I look at co-op games, if I had just played this and not had played the original Pandemic, I wouldn't have been too impressed where I was like, oh, this is going to be one of my go-to co-op games. It didn't really quite stand out the way I hoped it would. I really just prefer the original. I do love the original with the In the Lab expansion. That's my favorite. The base with the In the Lab, I love that. I still prefer that strongly to this one. So should you get this, if you haven't played Pandemic before, I would still try the original first. If you've played the original, you play it a ton and you really love it, and you want to try something in the similar universe but something different, I would definitely try this one. For me, this is a try before buy. If you like the other ones, if you've played them, Iberia and High Tides, and you like having similar mechanisms but things twisting, then you're probably going to like this one too, because there are some interesting things there. That's what I think about Pandemic: Fall of Rome. Upgrade your gaming experience with Game Toppers, and until the end of the year, with the huge Christmas sale, get 15 to 20% off accessories, thematic mats, storage bags, and rail bundles while supplies last at GameToppersLLC.com.